Hey there, PhD friends, and welcome to another video. In today's video, I am interviewing Dr. David Mendez, and David is the host of the PopUp PhD podcast. I was on that podcast in early 2021. I love his work. It's a great podcast, especially for those of you, again, if you're here, who are looking to explore various avenues as a PhD. Another thing I love about David's podcast is that it is bilingual. It is both in English and in French. And so for all my Francophone people, all my, French speaking people, check out the podcast because you're also going to hear French there. But in today's episode, I chat with David about, again, the unconventional path that he has taken. He ended up going into medical communications, but then as you'll hear in the interview, after his children were born, he decided that his values mattered, his family was important to him, and so started something great from home. How amazing is that? So you're going to love this interview if perhaps you finished your PhD, you have some experience, and maybe you want to start a business or you want to start content creating. Content creation is actually a really great industry right now, whether that's YouTube or a podcast or Instagram or a blog. It is a booming industry, right? And so I think by listening to both of us talk about this, plus, his career transitions, you are going to gain some amazing nuggets, okay? And here's your reminder that I do have a LinkedIn for personal branding course in the works. It's almost done. If you want to be notified when that course launches, it's going to be important that you are on my email list. The way you get on that, there is a link in the description below. I give you a free 9-minute training on 3 tweaks you can make on LinkedIn to make your profile stand out. You can use those free tweaks right now today, so check that out, sign up, and then when the course comes out, you'll be notified. Let's get into the interview. All right, David. So it's exciting to have you. I was on your podcast about a year ago, and it's just a privilege to have you on the Bold PhD. So tell everybody who you are, what your educational background is.
Hi, G. Well, I'm super happy and honored to be on your show, and yeah. So my name is David Mendez. I am the host of the PopUp PhD podcast, where you did visit, or you're an alumni, let's say, of the podcast. But my background is as follows: I did my undergrad / master's in Portugal in microbiology and genetics. And after that, so I didn't go straight through the different stages, like boom, 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 like master's to PhD. Actually, my undergrad was a 5 years degree, which some time ago, which I don't remember, but in the 2000s was given an equivalence to masters. But after that, what I did was I stayed as a young, as a lab researcher with my bachelor's at the lab that I did my final project after those 5 years for a little while, and then I did different things before I started my PhD, and these different things were first doing some work for a government, like the equivalent of the FDA, but in Portugal, the drug administration. They were introducing generic drugs in Portugal, and there was some pushback from the medical community. So I was part of a cohort of young graduates we were taught a presentation. We were given data, and we were going to the different health centers around Portugal personally to give this presentation and do objection handling with the doctors to kind of give show the data that would kind of counterbalance the resistance that we were finding. This was almost a year. Then the government changed, the program was closed, and I was lucky to find this position teaching lab only in cell biology and biochemistry in a private university, teaching people who wanted to have jobs in the medical domain, but technical jobs. And this was when I thought, okay, maybe going for a degree is going to be cool, because I really enjoyed teaching. But I in my imagination, I felt I'd love to be a professor and teach class, actually, not only lab. And that's when I started looking for a PhD program. And this was again in Portugal, and I found that this PhD program geared towards neurosciences in the University of Coimbra, and I was accepted. I interviewed in a few others, but I was accepted in this one. And it's this type of program where the first year you have seminars. So we stayed in Portugal, and scientists, different researchers and speakers were coming from around the world to give us classes. We did that for a year, and then after that year, we were asked, "Well, where do you want to do your PhD?" And that's when I wanted to go somewhere. I didn't want to stay in Portugal, or I didn't particularly want it to stay close by. I wanted to find a subject that interested me, but also an environment that aligned with me, and that's how I ended up choosing Montreal. I interviewed also in London. I went to Heidelberg to interview. Also ended up choosing Montreal, and that's it. Eventually, I came to the Montreal Neurological Institute, did the practical part, the lab part of my PhD here, and ended up defending in 2010 back in Portugal, because that's the university that issued my PhD. Does this kind of
Wow.
answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. It was like all this winding journey of like international travel and all that, but it's pretty exciting, right? You're getting a PhD, teaching in there. So after that, after you had done all of that, then what did you decide to do after you had defended your dissertation?
Well, as I defended, because there was quite a lag between finishing, then submitting, then defending, almost a year. So when I defended, I already was lined up for work. But in the meantime, what had happened is that my money had finished, and I had to write without having funding. And I what I was able to do was to find a job that allowed me to do both. And this was actually tutoring for distance education. So here in Quebec, there's a system where between high school and university, there's another level called CEGEP, which is kind of preparing people for either a professional path or university. But some of these students get to this level, and they need to they're missing some credits from the high school level. And I was giving chemistry, like any science courses. Basically, I was tutoring these people so that they could have good grades at these specific courses, and then access what they wanted at the level that they were. But so that was the first professional experience, which was working from home, because it was it wasn't Zoom. Was it Skype? I think it was on Skype at the time. Another era.
Yeah, I know, right? We've come so far. Like, I don't think anybody born, any of the Gen Z people know what Skype is.
Skype is,
it's still around, but I don't think we use it as much, right?
It's kind of the rotary phone of video conferencing.
Of video conferencing, for sure.
But yeah, so in the meantime, so I wrote, did corrections, etc. Ended up defending, and when I defended, there were two things that had happened. Me and my partner had our first child, and I had found by talking with ex-colleagues at the institute, I had talked to them. Okay, what are you doing? What type of job it is? And I had found this company here in Montreal that does medical writing. Through networking, I gave my CV to one of these people I knew. She passed it on to HR. And so when I was defending, I was already going into this new career of medical writing. Actually, I had to take a break to come for the defense from that, but it was through networking. So as I was tutoring and writing, etc., I also kept in contact with people who I saw were leaving the research institute where I was and not staying in academia, and seeing what they were doing. And yeah, this question, this idea of writing about science to different public, to different audiences, really was interesting to me. I had always been interested in communicating and in languages, and I had always been good at writing, and that's how that happened. And then it was kind of starting that, come back to Portugal for the defense, and then going back and resuming life.
Yeah, so there are a few things in there that you said that I want us to explore a little bit. You talked
Hmm.
about the fact that you networked with people who you noticed were leaving academia. They had left the institute, but they had also left academia, and you were interested in chatting with them. Can we talk a little bit about that? Because I think sometimes when it comes to networking, people really do get nervous about the word networking because
Hmm.
especially for those of us that are introverts, or a lot of academics tend to be, like very, we keep to ourselves a lot. And so the
Hmm.
idea of maybe networking, sometimes it's difficult. So how did you do that? What were the practical things you did to network?
Hmm. Really, because at the time, if I remember, there was no, or I wasn't on LinkedIn or anything like that. But okay, there's one word that sums up everything for me, and it can be maybe easier for introverts or maybe not if you're really introvert, but the word is conversation. So
Mm,
even though I wasn't at the lab anymore, and I was doing this tutoring and etc. I was still in touch with my lab mates who were in lab, and while I was at the lab, I also, there was a larger community of people from different neighboring labs. We played soccer together. I even played ice hockey. A Portuguese playing ice hockey. Who does that? But there was a community, and I stayed in touch with that community. And then, it- once you leave, it's important to stay in touch with the people who are your friends. you know
mm,
it wasn't a question of, okay, now I'm gonna have to go meet new people, and people I don't know, or people in companies. No, I actually talk to my friends and say, hey, so where's this person, what's happened to them? Or do you know of someone in our group who now is, didn't follow up, from master's to PhD, or from PhD to postdoc? And it's through those conversations that someone said, oh, what, actually, this person and that person are both in this company, and it might interest you. It's medical writing. I didn't know what medical writing was at the time. So you know really, it's conversation. It's kind of staying in touch with that family, that kind of, that I experienced as a family, that got created by being in the PhD. And
mm,
that's why I think it's important when you're in your PhD to be part of the community, to take part in events, be it there was like softball, and it was never competitive. It was always a kind of an excuse to have some beers and some hot dogs while
mm,
doing something outside. But
mm,
somehow the fact of taking part in these teams and in these activities meant that there was a kind of a family that was created. There was a contact. There was closer with some people, less close with other people, but that's what I think was key and important in that moment, where I was no longer there, but was curious about what was happening to people that were finishing.
mm.
Does this make sense to you?
It makes a lot of sense, right? So I think there's so many lessons to learn from what you just said, David. That number one, a lot of the time when we are in academia, when we're in our PhDs, we have a research focus, and it's easy to say, I just want to focus on my research, I just want to get this work done. But there is a lot of value from what I'm hearing you say. There's a lot of value from building relationships with the people in your cohort, with other people within your program, because
Hmm.
ultimately these are people that leave and go into places that you may not think that you need it now, but you
Hmm.
may find out that later on they're a great person to actually refer you for that role, or
Exactly.
even just speak to you about how to get into that role.
Hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think that what you're saying is really powerful, because again, going back to the point I was making earlier, that sometimes when I share that people should network on places like LinkedIn or just network in general, people think, oh, I have to go meet new people, when really you have a network at your fingertips, right? And you can start taking advantage of that. And so through that, you found out about medical writing, you found out about roles, right? And so now you're a medical writer. So let's talk a little bit about what you do, like what's typical for you to do in your medical writing job. I know you do some translation work and such. You also have your podcast, which I want to touch on before we are done with this interview. But yeah, let's talk about what you do as a medical writer.
Okay, so just to be clear, so I was almost 5 years at this company. I went from medical writer to senior medical writer, and then eventually our second child was born, and and because of how we're set up as a family, and then the career, my partner's career, we decided, okay, or I decided I wanted to find a way to work from home, and this was an office, medical writing was at the office, work from home, and be able to take care of the kids, and be more involved on that side. So mostly today what I do is language services, biomedical domain. But I think it is still important to talk about medical writing, because I'm also doing this today and being, having success as a translator because of what I learned in medical writing. And also, that's what I was going to say. So the company, it's called IC Axon, and it was, I don't know how it is today, but at the time they were actively hiring people coming from academia. They had a system, and you got there, you did your interviews, there's a writing test, and if you pass and if you're selected, and if they feel that you are a good fit for the team, you start. And then you have 3 months where you're shadowing someone, and you have this manual to learn. There's a whole onboarding process. There's a whole unlearning of academic speak and academic writing to normal, to the writing and the way of communicating that's adapted to the different audiences that the clients of the company want us to reach, be it more corporate or more Salesforce, etc. So it was a great learning experience going through these 5 years, going from junior to senior medical writer. But it's not something I do much today. Sometimes people reach out for small things. Medical writing was a cool experience because I touched upon so many things, like from cataract surgery to AIDS. My first project was a huge AIDS training program, or they were manuals to train Salesforce on treatment for AIDS. And the research is moving, so these companies, they need updates to their learning systems. And so basically it was using the skills that I had learned in the PhD, of finding articles, citing as you write, etc., etc. But the writing, the level of the level of discourse and the way you write, the tone in which you write, that was where the difference was. But the rest of the process was the same. So medical writing was great in that aspect of learning every day something. Then of course there's some routine to it, as there is in any job, right? But I think that kind of sums up very, very quickly my experience in medical writing. Of course, once I became a senior medical writer, then I accumulated more responsibilities, onboarding of new people, that were coming in, etc., which was also cool to me. But like I said, eventually I needed to find a solution to work from home. Languages it's something that has always been a passion of mine, and I have a knack for languages. And then when I was starting to look for a way to kind of transition, someone I knew needed a translator, where their company where they was working weren't happy with their translator, and then they reached out to me, and I said sure, and I became a full-time freelance. Like those first years with that client was like full-time as a freelancer. So it was kind of a lucky strike in a way. And then also a lot of learning. And then then after that time, I felt I needed some I think we also, as PhDs, we have this thing of we need training to do something. So I went and actually got a certificate in translation because I felt for me, but also for my clients, the fact that I would have some formal training would be positive and helpful. So I did that, and then today I have a nice small portfolio of regular clients that I really love, and that for whom I do different things. For example, I work for the I work with, not for, because it's a freelance, but with the World Foundation for Hemophilia, and I really love the fact that that it's kind of a, well, it's a non-profit, but I really love that I'm working in something that helps people directly and for free versus working in projects that sometimes are just for a very particular or in-house audiences, which happens a lot in pharma, of course.
Mhm.
I feel that
This
I'm
is
maybe
this is
rambling a little bit, but
No, this is amazing. And you're not rambling at all. I feel like people need to know this side of it because you went from being a medical writer in an institution, right, in an organization. Then you decided on the birth of your second child that you needed something that would allow you to be around for your children. And I think that this idea of allowing your values, right, to play into your ultimate career goals is really, really important. Because when it's not aligned, this is when we get burnt out. This is when we get frustrated. A lot of things happen. I
definitely.
remember there was a role I had that involved a lot of travel. Eventually, I that role ended. But
Mhm.
in the beginning, it was great money, it was great benefits. But eventually, I realized that I would be away from home about 5 or 6, 5 days out of the week. 4 to 5 days
Yeah.
out of the week, I was on the road. And in the beginning it was exciting, but then after a while it was I was beginning to realize that it maybe wasn't so good as somebody who had a family. So
Hmm.
everybody's in different stages of their life. You may be single, married, have kids, and I think it's really, really important to align your values with the job choice you go with. Ultimately,
Hmm.
you're still using your skills of research, you're
Oh
still
yeah.
using your skills of writing, you're still learning so much every day. That's one of the reasons I love medical writing. Even sometimes the topic may be really difficult. Like recently, I was working on a really difficult topic. It was
Hmm.
really, I don't know why, but this particular topic was really hard for me. A topic in the pharmaceutical industry. I learned something new. I spent a lot of hours and I learned something new. So there is definitely something to be said for, first of all, using the skills that you have, but also that intangible of connecting your values with your
Yeah.
job choice. That's absolutely important. So let's
Yes.
talk briefly about your podcast, the Papa PhD podcast.
Yes.
You're always talking to other PhDs as well on their careers. How did you get into that? And
Mm.
if somebody wants to create content, because again, I think the way you and I connected was when I had made a post back in November of
Yes.
2020 about being a creative PhD, right? And about content creators, PhDs who were content creators, because I didn't
Hmm.
see a lot of them. I knew a few, but I didn't see a lot of them. And that's how you and I got connected.
Hmm.
So let's talk about that, like content creation and that whole
Hmm.
world.
Yeah, content creation is. I think it's getting easier every day.
Mhm.
But how I started Papa PhD. Well, the first thing is that I anytime a university around here invited me for a career panel, I say yes, and I want to go talk to students and answer their questions about careers, about specifically medical writing. There was moments where it was about that, but about transitioning outside of academia. It's a question that leaves a lot of people anxious and fearful, and so I said yes, and I noticed that some of the questions were coming up year after year, and some of the angst and some of the stress was different cohorts of students were feeling the same. And in 2019, at a moment where there was a lull in my work because I had finished a big project and I had to kind of resume with my translation clients, there was some messaging. I don't know if it was on Facebook or Instagram saying why you should start your podcast in 2019. And I've like I played the clarinet, and when I was in this like orchestra, I was recording, so I had some recording material. I'm kind of a gadget guy, not a gearhead per se, but I had a good microphone, I had an interface, etc., etc. And the fact that I was waiting for work to resume, this message like hit my retina at the right moment. I had the stuff, and the will to use it too. It kind of all gelled together, and I said, well, I could, and I know so many people who have transitioned out of, after their PhD. Why not just turn on my mic and start with the people I know from the lab, who were in the same lab or in different in labs close by. That's how it started. I kind of talked about it. A couple of people said sure, and I said okay. The ball is rolling. It has started. So that was the beginning. The thing is, I think today you don't even need to have to start. You don't need to have all of what I had by chance. Today you can start with the quality of microphones that, let's say, an Apple earphone has. You can start your podcast on your phone. If you have a message to put out there, you just start. You do an episode 0. You present yourself. You of course need to have a concept. You need to at least commit to do a series of like 10 episodes, and then you'll feel okay, this is something I like, this is something I can integrate in my routine, in my weekly, in my monthly routine. And if so, well, you're well on the way to start the process, because there's a question of consistency. To you can there's two ways, at least for me, to that I see people doing it. Some people, like for example, Zoe Ayers talks about academic mental health. She produces great infographics about mental health in academia, but it's not all the time. She sometimes, boom, she comes up with another one. But it's her presence on Twitter. That's what's consistent, and she's always there, always building up the conversation, etc. If you want to start something like a YouTube channel or a podcast, it's really, you really need to be sure that there's some aspect of passion to it, because it's not easy to say, okay, every Thursday I'm going to publish a full episode, and maybe even another one on Monday, whatever. But to be consistent in a month, in 6 months, in 12 months, you need to have, it needs to be some sort of a passion. But the thing is, with the phone, and mine is charging, I can show it, but just that little tool that everyone has in their pocket today, you can do vlogs, you can film yourself, and you can start your content creation adventure from your dorm room, whatever, from your phone. And that's why I think. And then there's platforms that make it super easy, like Anchor and other ones that are even free, that make it really, really, or lower the bar for just getting started. Then
And
I don't know.
I think sometimes that's the thing, is that because the bar is low, a lot of people start and then they burn out very, very quickly.
Yes.
And yes, they start out, and because it's really easy. Like, you're so right. It's really easy, David, to get started with a podcast, with a YouTube channel, with a blog. But will you be consistent with it? And does your passion show through? And yeah, but we both of us encourage you that if you are an academic, you're still a human being and you still have opinions to share. If you want to do that, you should go ahead and do that. And I think, maybe both of us are, I don't know if we're great examples, but we're good examples, right? David is a better example because he's done his podcast for a long while, and 60,000 plus downloads, which is phenomenal, and that's amazing. So I was trying to be humble.
Well, if we are very niche, let's say, if we compare ourselves to someone who's doing a true crime podcast, we're microscopic. So but I think in the space of academic creators, academic YouTubers, I think you are doing a great job in consistency, in trying to make things look good, dynamic. I really appreciate that in what you do. And in the at least in the podcasting space, a lot of things get born that die within 7 episodes, and I think
For sure.
it's been like that for a while. um, the thing is, if you have something in you that you want to share, do it. If you want to do, if you have a seven episode series you want to do that, and don't worry about consistency, because I don't also want to put that pressure on people.
Right.
But the thing is, if you have it in you, well, people now want to discuss, want to consume podcasts as one of their sources of entertainment, information. Same thing for YouTube. People have issues, real issues in daily life. What do? They go on YouTube and
Yeah.
ask the question,
Mhm.
So if you have that creativity within you, and also if you kind of have the tools, and if you're good at, I don't know, editing video for some reason, or editing audio for another, like was my case, go for it. It's a great moment to jump in.
Mhm.
um, then the other thing is, you can also just simply start an Instagram account or a Twitter account to just take part in some conversations. And then we're getting to something you mentioned, LinkedIn, which you can be a content creator on LinkedIn, but that's not what it was created for. But they're starting to
Mhm.
we're doing lives on LinkedIn now. If the subject relates to something professional, etc., it is another place where you can be. But LinkedIn, contrary to the other ones, which I think are optional, I think I would tend to say that it's kind of mandatory to be on LinkedIn today.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. I agree with you. And you see, the other thing, the other side of content creation, I believe, and everything you said is so valid. And I think every academic should be on LinkedIn, to be honest. All the other platforms, yes, you can create a presence there, but I think LinkedIn is really impactful right now. And also, because I'm a bit of a social media nerd, like other platforms
Mm-hmm.
do not give you as much reach as much as you get on LinkedIn. That's just the plain truth. YouTube, you have to please the algorithm. You have to do all these SEO things with
Yeah.
search engine optimization. With Instagram, you have to get on Reels and all that. But LinkedIn is right now a really great platform to start sharing any message that you have. And I
Mm-hmm.
want to just even touch on the impact that content creation has on other people, because I've had people write to me and say, hey, I used to do a podcast called the Clever Writer Podcast. I decided to shut it down this year because my plate was getting so full.
Yeah.
But when I was doing that podcast, there were about 50 episodes on that podcast. There were people that wrote to me and said, hey, thank you for putting this out. Because of you, now I got my first client as a writer.
Mm-hmm.
People reached out to me and said, I've now made this thing my whole career. It's really amazing if anybody's listening or watching this and they're like, gee, you helped me too,
Mm-hmm.
like go ahead and say it in the comments, or maybe I haven't, and whatever. But the point is the point is there is some impact. And I don't know, my personality is a very I want to make an impact. I want to help
Mm-hmm.
people.
Of
And
course.
if you're like that, more than the other things, because there are other benefits to content creation too, like people discover you and invite you to speak, right? Or you get to maybe when you write a book or you create a course, you can sell it to your audience. If
Mm-hmm.
it's helpful to them, you can start coaching people if your audience is asking for it, or the people that listen to you and what you're asking for. So there are definitely other benefits, and maybe financial
Mm-hmm.
benefits to content creation. But for me, it's the impact. What would you say is the biggest, I guess, the biggest high for you when it comes to content creation?
Well, it's exactly what you said. So one of the challenges, especially as a podcaster, but as a content creator in general, is that we are, in our offices editing audio, making sure that everything sounds fine, making it, improving this, improving that, trying new things. And then there's especially for the podcasts, you put it in, you send it into the world, and then there's no direct feedback. You can see how many downloads there were. You can see in what, in what country, etc., etc. But because podcast is something free that people, just subscribe to and listen to, and they go about their lives, there's no direct feedback from the listener. So whenever you have that one message saying, "Hey David, I love that this happened in an episode about a woman who, she was actually at the same institute where I was, and she became an entrepreneur, and she has this biotech startup, and said the comment was, it was great to see, as a PhD student, to see that as a woman I can thrive, I can thrive for being an entrepreneur later on. Just the fact that this image, you planted this image in my brain, that I can now imagine myself, put myself in the person's shoes, it's opened the horizons for me. That
How
type of thing is the best.
amazing. How amazing. It's like the best. I'm telling you, it's the best. Like your whole day, you could be having a bad day and somebody says that
Yeah.
to you, and trust, the whole day changes. Like you forget about like and similarly to sometimes people do send negative feedback, or you will get the occasional mean comment. That's less than the good comments for sure. But both of them can have an impact, but usually I try to like highlight those big ones and then be excited
Yeah,
about those, because that's always
for sure.
exciting.
One thing I wanted to say is also, one, if you're, because I think, anyway, in my experience, I'm an overthinker, and I think maybe a lot of us who do PhDs are, and you might think, oh, why should I start a channel on this thing that interests me? There's already a bunch of them out there. And I want to discourage you of thinking like that, because each creator has their audience. The audience is huge, and you have your tribe that are going to like your flavor of things. So don't block yourself from jumping and from trying something in terms of creation, because you think, oh, someone does a photo, does a podcast about a YouTube channel about photography already, I won't start mine. No, your channel does, they'll be your tribe. So I want you to be, it have to do with where you live. It could have to do with the country you're in, the culture you come from. And that will make it your channel. And so I just want to encourage you to follow that. If you feel that urge to start something, just do it. And don't compare yourself to things that already exist too much.
Absolutely. Don't do it. Don't compare, because you'll easily discourage yourself when you begin to compare, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
This is such a great conversation, David. Thank you so much for gracing me with your presence. If people want to find you, where will they find you?
If they have questions for me, they can write it to david@papaphd.com, or else, Papa PhD is on Twitter and Instagram, and on both of them, it's at Papa PhD Podcast. And then, of course, if you want to talk careers, etc., I would say, hit me up on LinkedIn. And there's groups there that I'm on of PhDs talking about careers, and G is also in there. And I'll be happy to answer your questions, and to maybe introduce you to people and to groups of people that might help you on your journey.